Hello, I'm Mitra Sorrells, and welcome to this webinar produced by FocusWire in conjunction with our partners Cyclum and Stripe. Today, we will be discussing Travel Reimagined, how Gen Z is shaping tomorrow's trends. As we're going along, please put your questions for our panelists in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many of those as we can after the discussion. And of course, we are recording this, so anyone registered will receive a link to watch it on demand. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Martin Cunnison. He is Travel Director at Cyclum, an international experience engineering firm. James Lemon, Global Lead for Hospitality, Travel, and Leisure at payment service provider Stripe. And Alka Carter-Manning, Vice President of Supply Management at TUI Musement, a platform for activities and experiences worldwide. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks, Mitra.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Mitra.
Great. So, we know that the travel industry is in the midst of a shift, fueled in part by a post-pandemic uptick in demand and also the entry of Gen Z into the market. And that's creating challenges and opportunities that travel brands need to be aware of and to consider as they plan their strategy for the years ahead. I want to share some recent Focusrite research that I think will help frame some of our discussion today. We conducted a survey in the US earlier this year regarding consumers' use of social media in travel. 75% of respondents ages 18 to 34 are using social media in their trip planning, with the most common being Instagram, X, Snapchat, and TikTok. 65% of those 18 to 34 say they have made a visitation or travel purchase decision as a direct result of travel content viewed on social media. That certainly speaks to the power of that. We also have done a separate survey this summer in the US regarding consumers' use of technology for travel. Specifically regarding generative AI, general usage grew among those ages 18 to 34 from 31% in 2023 to 55% in 2024. That was higher than other age groups surveyed. And the top use of generative AI for people ages 18 to 34 is entertainment, followed by leisure travel. And when asked what they want from technology in the future, above all else, the respondents said it was to help them save money when traveling, followed by saving time, navigating disruptions, and finding things to do and see. So clearly there's an interest to turn to technology to help create a much better travel experience. Martin, let's maybe begin our discussion with you talking about a report recently produced by Cyclum and Stripe that was entitled Navigating the Future, Frictionless Travel for Gen Z. Tell us more about how this report came about in collaboration with Stripe.
Sure, John. Thanks, Mitra, and thanks for the invite to join this webinar. It's great to be with James and Alka. Well, you've just demonstrated and described a number of key statistics that are boggling everyone's mind. There's a huge opportunity around Gen Z, and they seem to be regarded as a fairly hard and notoriously hard to reach group. As the slide shows here, international tourism is pretty much by the end of this year expected to make a full recovery to those pre-pandemic levels. Much of this strong bounce back we can directly attribute to being fueled by this entrance of the Gen Z population. So that's the 1997 to 2012 born generation, and they're coming into the working population and with money to spend. So a statistic on this slide is just under $500 billion of value attributed to Gen Z. And actually what that translates to be through our research is a third of this third of the population is now becoming the largest purchasing demographic of all global air travel. So clearly it's an important part for us as a business. It's an important part for us supporting clients in the travel industry. So user research-led design is exactly where we sit at Cyclum. And we've been obviously partnering with the likes of Stripe for the last few years and with TUI since around 2020 to get a deeper understanding of what this Gen Z demographic is doing and how they're redefining travel behaviors, preferences, and expectations. So being that they are the first sort of digital native generation and a very mobile first forward generation. It's from that we're looking at what's influencing their purchasing decisions around sustainability, authenticity, personalization, and ultimately seamless digital travel experiences, which is where we're at right now.
Okay. So, James, we know that Gen Z is known for its tech fluency. It's the generation of digital natives. So it makes sense that they would prioritize an efficient, convenient travel experience. Can you tell us a bit more about what this means for travel companies and their offerings and how they should be interacting with this evolving market?
Yeah, absolutely, Micha. So I think fundamentally, with coming back to a couple of your data points, with phones always being with this generation, with 80% people booking, researching for that first purchase, and then other purchases through the trip. Like that's definitely a theme there. And then with 65% of Gen Z saying they've actually gone ahead and made a trip purchase or visit based primarily on social media, I think that unlocks this theme of frictionless travel that we're going to spend a little bit of time on. What is frictionless travel? It's this kind of smooth, effortless, and uninterrupted interaction throughout the entire travel journey, from your initial research all the way through the trip to kind of post-trip activities as well. And there's this expectation that it really works where they want it, on and in any channel. And to bring it to life, I suppose let's think about four examples that we'll see all the time in the travel industry. The first is this, let's call it on the go optimization. From the world of retail, we know customers love to check out with just one click. We've all seen that over the last 72 hours or so with Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And that really speaks to the theme you mentioned around saving time. So allowing customers to search and book their next travel choice on the go, get that confirmation, and then get on with their trip is really important, whether it's the first purchase and they're actually taking care of, flight and hotel and the broader itinerary, or while they're on the go, actually picking up ancillaries, planning activities as they go, kind of making one-off purchases. Let's not let the device they're on affect the experience that they want to have. The next theme is really, I think, around making travel bookable in every channel. So you talked about social media, but we're seeing this explosion in new consumer channels that are really meaningful to Gen Z and will become everyday kind of travel shopping channels of the future. So in particular, I think we're seeing the rise of banks getting into kind of being their own OTA. We're seeing, ride sharing apps moving into becoming super apps. And even in the world of AI, Stripe and Perplexity last week launched a tool where, in the Perplexity app, as you're kind of going through your travel planning or planning, something in retail, you can literally go and book directly and pay directly in Perplexity. They then hide all the complexity of what's actually happening behind the scenes, and travel suppliers will get paid with virtual cars. But the principle is that there's all these new channels where I think searching and shopping for travel will become really popular, and we've all got to really embrace it. How are we going to embrace it? Well, it's about making sure our content shows up in the right channel, with the right price, with the right payment options to convert each particular travel with their personal preferences. And I think crucially, and we'll touch on that in the report, is that I think that starts to then impact loyalty. Gen
Yeah.
Z, as you mentioned, are really driven by value. And I think incentives will play a big part of that. But then what's the incentive to switch my loyalty? Potentially some of these traditional loyalty programs will need reform. And that's, I think, something that really kind of drew out of the report. One interesting kind of example in this world of personalization and loyalty, Stripe are working with, the Ennismore Group, who run Hoxton Hotels. They've launched their new disloyalty program, which you should definitely take a look at. But effectively, it's a membership program. So you go and have your first stay. They upsell you on this idea of an annual pass. So you get, free coffee every day. You get discounts on F&B, get discounts on future stays. But it's all marketed through their social media channels. It's this idea that you get a ton of extra value. You build it into your overall lifestyle. And that then builds kind of lifetime engagement with that brand. But on social media channels, yes, they have their own app, but that's not really the focus. It's about finding customers where they are and building the idea of these retail like drops of offers. The last theme, I think, is unified commerce. And this is just the idea that, look, once you've got my details, every other touch point should be fast, it should be paperless, and it should be personal, whether that be in the online space or in the real world. And actually, why do we even need to have a difference? If I take someone like Muse, another Stripe partner, a property management system for hotels, they're making sure that customers, once they've made that initial booking, they have real optionality around how they check in. They can pay in advance online, they can check in at a kiosk, they can check in with a human being, they can obviously pay at the end. But the idea is that, you could be on your device in that lobby, you're still having a true travel hospitality experience. But, the friction, and particularly the payment friction, has been completely whisked away from the traveler. And so I think all of this just adds up to this idea that growth opportunities for travel companies are going to be about capturing new purchase moments right through the trip. If you're a travel agency, are you positioning the right relevant opportunities for in-trip experiences and spend? If you're a hotel group, are you nudging guests to local tours, activities, or co-working spaces? For travel management companies, are they really capturing every group, meeting, transfer? Are they capturing that team dinner spend at the end of the trip? So are you bookable in every channel? And are your teams regularly testing that? Like, does your content really show up the same on social media or AI as it does in your own channel? And I think as these experiences kind of supported by some of the newer technology available behind the scenes, especially payment infrastructure, that I think will enable travel companies to build experiences that customers really trust. And I think the challenge is if you don't get it right, your competitor probably will. And we see a lot of the big OTAs already making big leaps and bounds in the space of frictionless travel, seamless travel, and payments. And we really want to help every travel company be able to make that. So I guess, yeah, that's kind of our take on it. I think the Stripe Cyclone report really captures some of that. It's got some great tools and ideas, especially when thinking about customer journeys. And I guess kind of over to Alka, really, because I think the TUI amusement team are doing this really well. And so, yeah, excited to dive into that.
Yeah, you know what? And actually, before we get to Alka, we have a couple poll questions that we want to get to. I also just want to say those examples you gave are so helpful to hear, to really bring it to life, James. And I just want to say that just the cleverness of a disloyalty program, I think is just very, very cool. So, okay, let's get to our poll questions if we could. We have two that we would like to bring up. The first one is about what sources do you use for travel inspiration? So please make your selection there. We'll give it a few seconds. Search engines, social media, word of mouth, travel booking websites, or travel guidebooks. Oh, look at that. It's a lot of social media, which makes me wonder, do we have a Gen Z audience here mostly, based on some of those data points we were seeing? Search engines still right up there as well. Word of mouth, always valuable. Give it another few seconds. I see some more results coming in. Okay, we'll end this one. Yeah, so we have social media there at the top, followed by word of mouth, and search engines right there. Actually, search engines just slightly above word of mouth. Those are both comparable. And then booking websites, travel guidebooks, still hanging on there with 19%. Okay, let's go to our second poll if we can. Okay, so this one, what payment method did you use for your last trip? Credit or debit card, digital wallet, buy now, pay later, bank transfer, cryptocurrency, or cash? Give that a few more seconds. Okay, and that, and share the results. Yeah, so I suppose no surprise there, credit and debit cards still right there at the top at 82%. Digital wallets starting to come on. I think that's something we're certainly going to be hearing a lot more about in the coming years. Okay, so let's move on. Alka, I know you may have some reaction to some of those results that we saw there. How would you say that travel companies need to evolve to meet the needs of Gen Z?
Well, I was smiling to myself just then because looking at social media and inspiration, my last birthday, I had planned a day out in London all around a bakery because I spotted a cream bun. So that was my entire experience in London for that particular day. I think it's really interesting, and I think when it comes to this generation and what travel companies can do, I think it may seem obvious, but you have to keep these characteristics of Gen Z front and center. So when I'm looking at my cousin, and what does he want? He wants everything on his phone. He wants ease of travel. He wants everything to be instant. He wants to be inspired on his phone. But at the same time, what are the Gen Zs looking for in terms of products? So they want that whole cultural experience. They want to be immersed into heritage and so forth, and also have that real be really, quite aware in terms of their carbon footprint too. And James actually summarized his point earlier really well, when he was really fundamentally talking about a customer journey. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So if you're looking at that whole piece around inspiration, and yourself, you shared some brilliant statistics here. So we've got a big proportion who are really relying on social media to be inspired. And I think that's what's really important when we're looking at things such as our content strategy. Just a couple of months ago, I was reading an article that Condé Nast had actually written, where they said on one particular month they were monitoring the use of the hashtag holiday, and it got up to 3 million views, and about 60% of that was from Gen Z audience, and that's all around restaurants, trips, things to do. So I think all really important, but as much as content is really important in terms of video content, it needs to be authentic. And the beauty of social media is it doesn't have to be perfect either. And what's also important is the aspect of reviews, and just being able to showcase what an experience feels like, and to complement that also with concise content. As we've touched upon today, it's really important that we're just being as concise as possible. And then you go into planning stages. So we know we've got some brilliant AI travel agents. So it's great in terms of being able to put in your what you actually want from your trip. But at the same time, you also need to balance that human touch with AI also. And I think that's something that's really important to be very aware of. And also this can also be relatable to things such as reviews. So again, going back to authenticity and planning what you want, and planning how people want to feel when they're booking this experience. And then pricing. We know that this generation isn't necessarily going to a search engine in order to look at price comparisons as well. So it's a case of looking at AI options, but also it's really important that we build out that trust, so that customers know what they're getting from what they're paying, and also that they don't have to continually have to get off your website or off your app to be able to do price comparisons. So it's the piece around confidence, trust, and also how are you adapting your product with pricing, and how are you adapting your product with reviews. Although I'm working for TUI Amusement and talking about distribution, I have also come from the supplier background, where we've used things such as TripAdvisor reviews to actually really shape product offering. And on the TUI Amusement side, we're constantly adapting our products. And ideally, we want to ensure that we are serving so many different types of customers. And the best way you can do that is learning from reviews in that segment. And then booking, as James has just mentioned, and Martin, looking at making that as smooth as possible, and making sure that we are, having the right payment options for this generation too. And we've just said, okay, looking at this poll now, we're talking about how credit cards was the leader here, but also, digital wallets are hugely important. I recently, for me personally, I did use a digital wallet. So it's really important that we are using the right metrics here, or the right payment options here too. And then you can't forget about the post-trip experience. So when I'm looking at TUI Amusement and actually what we do for the TUI group, so we have a lot of people who go on sun and beach holidays, and what's really important is when somebody's in Mallorca having a great family holiday, or they also want to know, actually, what can I do in my own destination? So being able to say, well, okay, you've had a great holiday, but this is what you can do. Let's just say it's a UK traveller, what you can do in the UK. But also, how are you then also balancing the AI experience, with the inspirational side? Because, I think with AI, you can also fall into the trap of, okay, well, if someone's been on a hiking experience, do you just want to target that same customer with hiking experiences, or do you want to add that personal touch and offer them alternatives? And then, you think about loyalty and capturing of demand. So it's not just about having that customer just come to your door, it's how you're building loyalty. So how are you using key data metrics to ensure you really know your customer, you know how they want to travel, you know what their parameters are, you want to be able to inspire them in a manner that's, akin to BCP, Gen Z, social media, and you really want to build that trust that they know they're getting the right product, right pricing, and they know exactly, and we know exactly what they want. So there's a number of things here, but I think these categories I feel are really, really important when we're looking at Gen Z.
Yeah, it's really helpful to have you break it down in that way and show some of those key points at each step along the way. It's clear technology is really influencing every point of the customer journey. And the power of Gen Z, I think, is being felt more all the time as, some of these changes are being spurred by some of their preferences. James, maybe if we can go back to you, what would you say, particularly as you think about some of those steps that Alka has just outlined for us along the customer journey? What are some of the key moments there where you believe delivering a frictionless experience is really critical? You know what, James, you are muted. Can you?
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Misha. I think a phrase that we love to kind of think of at Stripe is that payments experience really is the customer experience. So actually, payments should become a key part of all kind of customer journey mapping and all kind of strategy and tech stack thinking for leading travel companies right throughout the trip. I guess a few examples of where we think that people can really make the most of new and potentially existing payment experiences would be firstly this kind of it's this idea of seamless booking and addressing that kind of mobile first mentality we talk about in the report. We touched on it. Gen Z expects this seamless, one-click payment option on their smartphone, and crucially, not just for that initial booking, but for any purchases. And in practice, that means things like offering wallets. Google Pay and Apple Pay are shown to be 3 times faster to fill in than doing, your name, address, and card details. And they're super mobile friendly, but nearly 90% of websites just still don't offer that. We'd also really recommend experimenting with new payment types. So, there's a product called Link by Stripe, which is if we've ever seen a card anywhere in our network before, that's kind of millions of different kind of merchants. The first time they land on your site, they'll still get that kind of one-click experience with a saved card. And saving cards, I think, is just a key personalization of personalization. So we kind of move on to kind of personalization of payment methods. It's about the right payment method for the right customers. So, not many people think about this outside the US and Europe, where cards are still dominant, but actually different countries have got really popular local payment types. If you're from the Netherlands, you'll be using Ideal. If you're from China, you'll be using WeChat. You'll be using Blick. If you're from Poland, there are hundreds of these different payment types popping up all over the world. And I think Gen Z is really going to value that customization of experience and the ability to pay in their preferred method, and of course, their preferred currency, which weirdly is not that easy in travel because your booker is often in a completely different place to you. So again, Stripe have worked really hard to make sure that the experience the booker gets is localized to them and not necessarily localized to kind of you, where your hotel or your experience or your airline or your travel agency might be based. Another kind of payment method idea is this idea of just saving credit cards, helping your repeat customers really feel you know them and saving time next time. And we see that's a big pull for people towards the OTAs. They've probably been better at that than some of the kind of hotel chains and experience providers and other agencies. And then the last thing around personalization is this idea of paying in installments. So Gen Z are clearly balancing budgets and this love of travel and experiences. So just enabling them to pay in installments was, that's something that you can do with Stripe, a product called Billing, and it's used by people like Luxury Escapes and other leading OTAs. So you can just spread the payments over time before your trip. Or you can do one of these buy now, pay laters. And that's more of a credit product where you might take the trip and still be paying it off afterwards. You've probably heard of providers like Klarna, who are incredibly popular in Europe and around the world. Partners of Stripe, like Affirm, who are very popular in the US and other countries around the world. Well, these new products are offering whole new customers to the travel category because they have their own online shopping malls, and customers are actually loyal to that payment method, and they love that kind of shopping experience for that particular, for Klarna, for example. These buy now pay laters are proven now to drive conversion. They bring bigger order values. People typically treat themselves to a suite or an extra couple of days, and really importantly, they actually take the risk. So they give you as the merchant all of your money, and then they really kind of handle the collection and any debt issues with customers. But they do their own credit checks, and actually it's proving to be really popular and growing really fast. And then the last piece that we kind of talk about check-ins here, but I think the broader theme is really balancing speed and trust. So I think we've all been online and felt a really slick checkout experience versus other websites where you still go, goodness, this is really dated. Just doesn't feel like you're moving smoothly between cells. You can't quite see it if you're on your mobile. It actually takes hundreds of small optimizations to drive a great conversion. And so especially for first-time visitors, really showing them that you've thought about the experience, you're visibly showing them that it's a secure site, and you're hiding some of this complexity of the travel ecosystem. I think we still put content in front of customers that maybe is from kind of some of the legacy distribution systems, and actually doesn't really showcase that kind of experience, that trust, that sense of kind of e-commerce we need to be thinking about. But look, if we look at hotel check-ins, why on earth are we still giving our cards time and time again when we've given them online? Why are we kind of filling in forms and giving credit cards at the front desk? Well, that's about the hotel's priorities, right? They're trying to reduce chargebacks and frauds and their payment costs, but it's at the cost of the guest's precious time. And so that's now impacting on your loyalty, your satisfaction, your chance of seeing that customer again. So one of the things we're doing is supporting some of these leading property management systems and global hotel chains like Accor and Best Western to really give guests flexible ways to pay, while actually helping those hotels behind the scenes stay on top of their security, their compliance, and manage some of these disputes and chargebacks that they face. So look, a couple of things I want to kind of finish on. One is, I think, what's best in class? Well, it's always a cliche that we talk about Uber. They really mastered frictionless payments first. But what you're going to be seeing now is Uber have actually moved to banking payments. So it's a much more low cost, but the banks are being pushed to create these frictionless experiences as well. Why should it be any less, why should it be any more clunky to pay from my bank account than it is with a card? So Uber and also Airbnb with Stripe in North America have launched bank payments in a really frictionless, seamless way as well. And so I think we're going to see a lot more in that space. Again, can they incentivize consumers to move to kind of paying with their banks when we're maybe so used to our credit card perks? Potentially, if we get it right in terms of positioning the security, the incentives, and saving time and money. I think before I finish, it's also worth just mentioning B2B payments. So travel is always an ecosystem. And in the past, I think any company trying to make third-party offerings on your own site, it always meant loads of negotiations, integrations, tying up your finance, your tech, and your ops teams. But I think if you think about your favorite food delivery app, ride sharing app, or kind of marketplace, Stripe has spent 15 years building 75% of the world's kind of marketplaces and ecosystems. And we're really excited about bringing that to travel. Any company now could build a marketplace, onboard merchants, assemble your own offers, packages, put them in front of your consumers in real time. And behind the scenes, we can help you make it really simple, how you settle up with partners, take your commission, split fees, keep that kind of transparency while hiding the complexity from the customer. A great example of this, when I first time I flew to San Francisco, I opened up my Lyft app, and I was able to book a Lime bike, and I didn't have a Lime account and I hadn't registered with them, but actually, Lyft handled that experience. They handled all the physical unlocking, and I assume, and I know it's true because it runs on Stripe, behind the scenes, they were handling all of that kind of commission, revenue sharing, kind of money movement. But the customer gets to experience and feel like a local because it's a brand that I trusted, helping me experience another brand, another part of the trip. So look, really exciting time for travel. I think we can be building frictionless experiences for travel and all kinds of new offers like this throughout the trip. And for travel sellers, for travel operators, I think we can all think about how can we use our trusted brand to capture much more of that trip spend. And look, we're really excited about the partnership with Cyclum. I think you really have to thoughtfully build this into the user experience you provide, and that's exactly what Cyclum are happy doing behind the scenes and helping customers do.
Wow, you've certainly given us a lot of great examples there about the opportunities for travel sellers. So, clearly, though, navigating all of those options across the value chain is no small feat. And Alka, I know you're kind of dealing with this all the time in your role. So, what advice would you have? How can travel companies go about tackling all of these different options and maximizing that opportunity?
I think it's easy to get quite overwhelmed with it all, actually. And I think, no doubt you'll be thinking it's a lot to digest, and it's thinking about, okay, how do we adapt? How do we change? How much do we invest? And I think what's really important is that you just look at your business and understand what the gaps are and how you can evolve certain areas. I obviously touched upon the customer journey. So maybe for you, that could be, okay, well, I want to improve more with our content for social media, for example. And when I look at when I'm looking at it from a TUI Amusements perspective and my role, it's you have tech on one side, but also you have companies such as B2B partners, like some of the largest OTAs who want us to help fill the gap with certain types of products. So we work really closely with them at a partnership level to understand exactly what that customer proposition is. And we may even actually design products. We did this with National Geographic just last year. And so I think partnerships are important because you're not alone, and you have key businesses out there who are there to help. And actually, we've got a perfect example here as well, right? With both Cyclum and Stripe, they're both actually helping to aid business and to make that customer journey easy. And it's not about having tech for tech's sake. Ultimately, it's about improving business, but also whether you're working in the back office, whether you're looking at UX design, looking at payments, me putting the right product on the shelf. Ultimately, it's keeping the customer front and center of everything that you're doing. And I think take it in small chunks rather than looking at it as a whole.
Okay, that's very helpful information. And Martin, maybe
Yeah.
we come back to you now to try to give us some concrete thoughts about next steps. So, where can organizations start when it comes to assessing their existing offerings and identifying how they can adapt to the changing landscape?
Yeah, sure. Well, as we've seen in the report, and invite everyone to look at that when we finish this. It reveals a lot across the travel chain. I mean, James has articulated extremely well around how payments is becoming the customer experience. I think that's a fair shout. I mean, certainly, if you look across that landscape, you've got a lot of bookable points now, a lot of touch points, and I think, as you just described, James, you're making you're making the system a lot more accessible to merchants to get into that different areas of the booking and payment chain. Typically in the past, we've seen a lot of travel companies running on legacy systems, and that's a huge change that they're going through. The entire industry is in a sort of process of transformation. And I think, obviously, if you're sort of thinking about where do we start to assess our offer, well, certainly what we've been doing at Cyclum is creating a proprietary user research service. We call it zone of tolerance mapping, and the user research is critical to our DNA. It's very important that we get everything understood around the customer, and we start to sort of delve into finding those insights on particular demographics or how we're performing against our peer group. So a deep direct engagement with surveys and interviews and usability testing, observing how passengers are actually or customers are interacting with those digital products. So that's revealing to us some really interesting stuff around whether you as an organization are working in the zone of delight, which is up in that top category. And you can see from our example here that sadly not many are operating in that area. And that's where you're sort of being able to identify where you can move the needle for an industry or for your particular target customers. In the zone of tolerance in the middle is where we're just delivering the basics, and then the zone of disappointment or despair is where we're creating, unfortunately, unexpected but also memorably bad experiences. So I'd say that this is a great way to sort of jump off. In the report, we're talking about lots of different statistics about where there's dropout rates. James shared with us earlier, 65%, I think it was, that Gen Zs will abandon checkout if their payment choice isn't there. So being able to kind of see those in visual form and understand where those weak points are, and also points of competitive advantage against peer group is key. We've spoken at length around Gen Z placing high importance on transparency and authenticity and sustainability. So I think looking at that, in terms of how we can connect on emotional levels or ethical levels, as well as the digits levels, building trust and obviously long-term loyalty in a backdrop where loyalty is fundamentally changing and becoming a whole new sort of hyper-personalized experience.
Okay. I'd ask each of you, before we get into some of the questions that have come in, what is one tech trend that you see shaping the industry in 25? And James, maybe if you want to start us.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, obviously there's lots of talk about AI and particularly Gen AI, but I do think that it's going to affect travel companies in a much more dramatic way, in a much more impactful way than potentially some people are thinking right now. And again, I come back to this use case of perplexity, right? So, we certainly know we're seeing kind of AI being used in inspiration, right? OTAs are building it in, some really interesting startups are doing some interesting stuff. And of course, now on ChatGPT and apps like Perplexity, you're almost creating new search engines, which is fascinating. You think about the tensions we've had with existing search engines as travel professionals over the last 20 years. Well, let's get ahead of it. Let's get ahead of it really early. So as I say, kind of a bit of a breakthrough a couple of weeks ago, for the first time with Stripe, a leading AI agent like Perplexity can have real-time booking as you go. Look, actually, what might my itinerary look like? Just what's happening there is as simple as Perplexity is taking a single payment and then they're just splitting it behind the scenes and doing multiple payouts to travel providers. They aren't interested in being the merchant of record. They're very much acting like you might see someone like a Google doing, but they're certainly going to be a huge source of traffic. They're certainly going to be a really interesting source of kind of content for consumers. So I would just suggest everyone really thinks about, where are those AI agents getting their content from, and how can you show up in a prominent way? Exactly the kind of questions we asked ourselves with Google, search engines like Google kind of 20 years ago. And then of course, are you ready to kind of ingest bookings and payments from those channels? So I think that's actually here now, and I think it will become much more widely adopted as you look at just the extent that AI is being used for trip planning, as you say, by Gen Z. I think we'll all think, oh, it's a nice to have, but actually, what if it does very quickly turn into a booking engine? I think it could be really transformative.
Okay. Who wants to jump in next with a prediction?
I would say that I guess I won't speak for you, Alka, but AI. It is
Yeah.
it is hard to not answer. What do you think one trend shaping the industry is without mentioning it? I kind of would echo a lot of that. I know, talking to a lot of airlines and merchants, search needs to be reinvented. It's just it doesn't work. It doesn't work for a Gen X or whatever I am, let alone for Gen Z. I think that kind of movement into we're not going to get to a hyper-personalized experience without having AI, and as James said, like agentic AI, which is the sort of next round of that development, and being able to not just have big data, but use big data and use it in a non-intrusive way. I mean, if you look at how customers respond, if you send them something that they want in the moment they want it, then the upsell is a dream. If you're sending something completely adjunct to where they're at in their journey or their mood or their moment, then it's going to fail. And I think, wrapping around those sort of customized itineraries, dynamic pricing is clearly an enormous part of the process. And I think, if there's a sort of subtext tech trend, which probably isn't as exciting as talking about the front end user developments, is that transformational side. It's getting out of legacy systems, and we're obviously helping a lot of clients on that process of platform modernization to be able to actually get anywhere near fulfilling this through sort of microservices and whatnot. So I think those kind of developments are going to happen, but not just happen over a few years. I think they're going to happen really fast. I think that's the moment we're in travel.
Okay. And Alka, what's a trend you're looking at for 25?
Well, I'm not going to talk about AI because Martin just did. I would, oh my goodness, there's so many. I would say, actually, Martin, you did touch upon big data, and I think that's hugely important. So big data and real personalization. So we keep talking about how just in terms of using data to make sure that you're building the right experiences, and just, you know, making sure that you've got real tailored experiences as well. I think that's hugely important. And also just taking those metrics and understanding how businesses are going to be performing from that too. But I think there's so many other trends as well. I mean, in terms of robotics and, you know, going into hotels and, you know, having your check-ins done by robots, and, you know, taking certain elements of concierge, you know, I suppose helping to support concierges as well. I'm very mindful of not taking that away, because that eliminates some of the human touch. So what will be really interesting is just, yes, tech has its place, but how do we ensure that we are weaving in all of the personal things? And when I spoke earlier about visual content, at the end of the day, it's that human touch that's creating that content, right? So, and that's what people want is, well, this is how I'm going to feel when I do this experience. So that's why it's really important to continue join all those dots.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we do have some questions that have come in, so let's jump into those. And I think this first one, maybe James, is for you. The question is, what are the advantages of using bank payments for merchants and for travelers?
Yeah, no, behind the scenes, I was just throwing this one into Stripe's LLM, but I do have some genuine answers that I've thought of as well. So I think the first thing I'd say is that actually there are a number of really popular local payment methods that already have bank transfers and bank payments behind them. So think about like Ideal in the Netherlands, or ACH, or so forth. Like, you might have heard of some of these things. They've probably just been a bit more typically used for kind of B2B, but I think they're really going to penetrate B2C. The short answer is the proposition for merchants is nice and simple. It is really around costs. And now that some of the tech has meant that the payments are still instant, it's still simpler for consumers. You can kind of build it into your normal payment stacks. You can kind of analyze it along card payments. I think the appeal for merchants is huge. I think we're at a really interesting kind of flux point in the industry of how do we make it attractive for consumers? You know, when we're doing our Black Friday shopping, when we're planning our next trip, how many of us really would choose a bank transfer option rather than kind of paying with a credit card? So I think some of the themes that'll come about is just kind of broader consumer education as it just becomes more popular. I think technology will help, as behind the scenes, things like open banking means that kind of live hookup from retailers to your own banking app will be seamless. You'll already know how to do it. You'll probably have already set it up. And then I think there's a layer of incentives here as well. And again, kind of playing nicely into the Gen Z trend around incentives. If I look at someone like Aer Lingus, they introduced kind of Pay by Revolut a few months ago, you may have seen, and they just offered a 1% discount on the flight. So just a really simple way to kind of nudge people to that kind of behavior. Is 1% the right amount? You know, I've got no idea. You know, when we launched, when Stripe and Uber launched bank transfers, they were doing kind of a $20 credit to get it set up. The setup takes about, you know, a minute, and then after that, it's as quick as a card payment. So I think that you know, we've got a choice as an industry, and I think retail and other, you know, B2C players are looking at it as well. How do we want to show up with customers when we think about bank transfers? But you can absolutely rely on Stripe to try and keep those rails really kind of frictionless and fast. But consumers will be asking, you know, do I get incentivized? Do I get my rewards? Do I get my consumer protections? You know, what happens if I need to charge back? And so I think it'll be over the next couple of years that we'll see that widely adopted. But as I say, you know, it's big in vacation rental. It's big in kind of bigger spend categories. You're starting to see it in Airbnb. We're seeing it with launching with Airbnb and Uber last year. So I think it'll be one we're talking about for a while to come, and definitely something Stripe's spending a lot of time and money.
It's interesting that the again, you know, an older Gen Xer, you know, the idea of having a Section 75 coverage if your merchant fails is obviously attractive for credit cards. But I think, and obviously adoption of high purchase tickets through account-to-account bank transfers is, you know, typically not had that. But I don't see that being the same level of concern in Gen Zs in the research. And I also see that, you know, as James is saying, you know, the ability to transform the way the loyalty works around different payment methods, and also to be able to split the payment up. I mean, again, you know, why are we paying 30 days down or paying in advance and then 30 days before we fly? You know, that doesn't sound to me like the world's most frictionless or flexible payment model for a very large purchase that you're making every year. So I think these are the new experiences we'll get in the future.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I would just add one last point very quickly on that. If you think about some of these super apps, like people who are using a Revolut or using a kind of a Grab app in Singapore, you're already often loading up those apps from your bank account, right? That might be the same with like your Starbucks card in the world of F&B, for example. So you already have that. They're then storing that, then you're just shopping from that. So it's kind of already slowly becoming more common. Okay, back to you.
Yeah. Okay, another question. While young people today tend to be quick to try out new tech, how can organizations effectively manage the transition to frictionless commerce, particularly in terms of internal operational processes and employees? And Alka, maybe this is something you can touch on for us.
That's a really good question. I think so much of this can be built on, okay, when we were mentioning reviews earlier, and we focus a lot on NPS scores, and a big part of that is how it's being driven by our operational teams as well. If I look at what we do in Sun and Beach destinations, so if anything, when I'm looking at employees wanting to ensure that operations are going smoothly, I think getting that feedback from those who are on the ground, who are dealing with customers on a daily basis, I think is really important. And then building out what those efficiencies could look like, and then working to see how that could effectively work out in terms of tech. We've invested a lot of money in tooling some of our the way we actually sell our products with our rep tool, for example, and a lot of the feedback for that was actually collated from doing various tests and working in market and working with those reps. So I think it's making sure that your employees are actually part of the solutions rather than making any assumptions, which I'm sure we wouldn't all do, but making sure that we're absolutely getting that on the ground information, from the ground information. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Another
question.
I was going to add that I saw in the report also that the Gen Z trust the AI more than they trust a human. So I think there's some of these changes that are going to come in and just be step changes, right? Yesterday.
And actually, we did some research not so long ago as well, but actually not with Gen Zs as such, slightly older audience, and we gave them some content and some images and said, well, how do you feel about this being an AI generated image or content? And about 50% weren't too concerned, but there was a big proportion of people who said, oh, that kind of affects my trust. And so it'll be really interesting to see how AI gets so advanced that it actually gets more buy-in from key customers from different generations.
Yeah. One final question before we close it out. Martin, I think maybe this is one I'd love to hear your response. Is the travel sector already thinking about Gen Alpha, or is it too early to predict the trends there?
That's very interesting. I mean, it's an extension of, to some degree, right? Because I think the Gen Z difference is truly digital native. And this is even, can you be more native than native? It's interesting. I mean, we've obviously gone down into Gen Z because they're coming into spend moment and becoming a very large and influential part of not just travel, other industries as well, but clearly, to take the lion's share of travel, global travel going forward is where they're at right now. I mean, Gen Alpha is going to come along and probably accelerate some of that even more, maybe have an even shorter time span. I speak on behalf of being the dad of Gen Zs and one Gen Alpha, so I can see how that's moving. But there are some big structural changes going in. I don't think we can achieve any of this without changing the fundamental sort of legacy on which we operate. That's changing. I think these new use cases are coming in and getting developed. I love what James is doing. I love the way Alka has then responding to that in her amusement business. So this is moving the bar up. This is moving people into the zone of delight for us. Good question. I think watch the space, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, and we have had some other questions that have come in. We unfortunately don't have time to get to those right now, but they will be shared with the panelists and they will do their best to respond to each of you that have submitted a question. So as we are wrapping up, I would just like to ask each of you to maybe provide your top 2 takeaways that you would want to share with the audience. And Alka, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I would say embrace digital transformation. And personalization. I think that's really important across all parts of the customer journey. And I would also say try and prioritize authenticity. Again, we spoke about content numerous times, and also sustainability. I think that's hugely important for this generation. So they're my 2 takeaways.
Okay,
For you,
James.
Look, for me, again, hopefully kind of reinforce it. It's just this idea that payments is just an incredibly strategic part of the customer experience and the technology stack. So actually thinking about the right key moments of the traveler journey where you can unlock new growth, capture new revenues, whether that be memberships, ancillaries, partnerships, etc. So that's kind of piece one. And piece two is just much more of a kind of professional thing for all of us, which is just, I think we still need to stay on top of these changes. I think probably everyone here has made the right step by attending or listening to this session, but just really be a student to some of the payment and technology changes that could impact your business and the countries you operate in. So just make sure you're skimming, some reports and thought leadership, attending webinars, keeping in touch with key people on LinkedIn. It probably is worth taking 30 minutes with potential partners in some of these innovation spaces so they can share what they're seeing. And I'd always recommend that people keep that strong eye on what's happening outside your own business.
Okay,
Yeah,
great tip there, Martin.
James. Yeah, I think first and foremost, this is a now thing. This is not happening. This is not speculating on what's happening in a few years' time. It's going on right now. This is the demographic that's influencing things and pervading everything else. My second one would be just to be about knowing your customer. And I think obviously, this customer is fickle and moving at an enormous pace. So the ability to do that and then redo it and then revisit it and optimize it is clearly going to be important. I think those operators that can really sort of have their finger on where those pain points are and be addressing those, they're the ones that are going to get the frictionless nirvana that we're all seeking.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, and I believe we were going to offer, there you go. Martin, you want to tell us what we're seeing here?
There you go. There's the QR code. If you're listening to this on your phone, I don't know how you're going to take a picture of that, but I'm sure we can make sure that you get a copy of it. That'll take you to just a website, and I think you're already pre-registered as attendees today. So grab yourself a copy of that, drill down on it. You've got our contacts. You've got mine. You've got Dalka's. You've got James's. So it'd be great to, as you said, James. If anyone wants to pick up the phone and have a chat, we're here and we don't bite. We're very open and interested to get your input and see where we can help.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, so much really useful information that the 3 of you have shared today. And I think it's great. Of course, as we said, everyone registered will get the link to watch this on demand. So they can all go back and listen more closely and take a picture of that QR code if they need to. So Alka, James, and Martin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.